All right, so I'm Samantha. I work at Hindley Gardens, and I usually am the one leading the field trips that we can't do this year, but my presentation was ponding, which is a portion of our field trips and my personal favorite. So we actually get to sample the macroinvertebrates in the pond, and normally you would get to catch those in little nets and really get hands-on with them. So if you have questions about the video, that's probably expected since things weren't as hands-on this year. And then as a fun disclaimer, I'm working from home today, so my little 8-month-old coworker might be heard in the background.
Perfect. So as of right now, we're just going to do a recording. So that way all the teachers, if you want to watch this at a later date, you hopefully have your questions answered. So I guess I'll go ahead and start. So where could kids look for macroinvertebrates at or near their home?
So that's a good question because, like I briefly mentioned in the video, they can be found pretty much anywhere. And then the number that you find and the variety that you find will tell you a little bit about that water. So even if there's a puddle, you might even see a couple. But if you find like a vernal pool, which is in a wooded area and remains wet part of the year, or a roadside stream, really anywhere you can find macroinvertebrates. You just might find a lot more in some places, and you'll find really different ones depending on the environment you're sampling.
Nice. So that actually kind of leads into two other questions that we were thinking of. So what macroinvertebrates are bad to find in the water? And then on that same regard, what are the better or best types of macroinvertebrates you can find in those local water bodies?
So I would argue that there aren't really any bad macroinvertebrates to find. I mean, aside from finding like invasive crayfish or something that's known to be detrimental, but it's more that you want a variety. So if you are only finding snails, they can live in very polluted waters and areas with really low dissolved oxygen. So if that's the only thing you're finding, not necessarily is that water bad, but that might be an indicator like, I should look into a few other things. Whereas caddisfly, for example, not only are they just like amazing to find because they're super well camouflaged and really fun to observe, they're also an indicator of good water quality because they can't tolerate pollution as well. And they like dissolved oxygen and moving water. So if you find those, you might be thinking, oh, this could be some higher quality water. But again, it comes down to diversity. So if you find a really wide range of invertebrates, that's typically a sign that you've found a pretty healthy ecosystem.
I have a question sort of that bounces off of that question. You mentioned that probably the only bad macroinvertebrates we can really find, the bad ones, are invasive macroinvertebrates like the rusty crayfish. If we find bad ones, like invasive ones, what should we do about that? Is there somebody we can tell? What should we do with the things we catch?
Yeah, so actually I would probably direct people to the River Raisin Watershed Council, just because I know less about how to actually handle aquatic invasives than like plants. So definitely report it. There's all kinds of apps. The MNFI has a plant app. I'm not sure if they have a aquatic one. So you could report it there, and then definitely just reach out to like your local organizations for help.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. So some silly questions that we were discussing a little bit earlier that kids would probably ask would be, what do macroinvertebrates eat? And then do they bite?
Yes. So the eat question is really fun. Some of them will eat, decaying plant or little bits of leaves, pretty typical, normal things. A lot of them, though, are what's called a piercer predator. And you'd be surprised how many macroinvertebrates have that title. And that means that they literally pierce their prey and oftentimes inject them with something to help like liquefy the body, and then are able to suck their prey up. So that's always really fun. And when kids are in person, we sometimes like demonstrate that as like having kids kind of act it out, and then call it like, now you're drinking your prey milkshake, which sounds pretty gross and crazy, but it is like the macroinvertebrate world is a whole different world. It's very crazy the way some of them eat. Or there's engulfer predators, which might be a little bit more typical of a predator-prey situation you think of on land, where they are literally just eating their entire prey. So you have pretty much a really wide variety still, you know, where herbivores, carnivores, and that's expressed differently in the macroinvertebrate world. And then as far as if they bite, you definitely do, like the ones who are piercer predators can bite in that they could pierce your skin. They're not going to like liquefy you. Obviously, you're too large. It'd be equivalent to like a bee or any other insect that would, you know, could pierce you. So we handle them with nets and cups in person, and unless I specifically say, okay, here, you can handle this one, it's always just better to err on the side of caution. And like any, you know, wild animal, you just kind of have to handle with care.
So, do you have any questions that students or the general public tend to ask you about macroinvertebrates that really stand out as really good questions that maybe we aren't thinking of?
So some of them, not so much a question, but a lot of people are really surprised to hear names they're familiar with. So like damselfly or caddisfly, they think of those things in the form that they see them. So they think caddisfly or mayfly even flying around and in its adult form. Dragonflies, for example, people don't realize that they actually spend significantly more time underwater in their larva stage than they do in their adult stage. The adult stage, some of them don't even feed. It's literally just to mate, reproduce. So when you think dragonfly, you think of wings, adult dragonfly, but it's kind of funny that it actually spends more time in the larva stage that a lot of people don't see or think about.
What are some of the common things that people might run across doing these types of surveys, looking for these aquatic bugs, these macroinvertebrates that aren't macroinvertebrates? Like, what other kinds of animals do people sometimes find doing these?
Yeah, so I even kind of messed up in my video. I didn't clarify. You can find tadpoles, but that's not a macroinvertebrate because it has a backbone. So that would be a vertebrate. So I think sometimes you see small creatures and just like think, oh, I found macroinvertebrates, because it's easy to get into the like pond mindset. But you just have to remember a macroinvertebrate comes down to that it's an invertebrate. So it does not have a backbone. Macro, we just add because you can see it with your eyes, because there's even more invertebrates that are there that we can't even see, that you would need a microscope for. So like fish and tadpoles and things like that, no matter how small they are, they still have a backbone. So that's not going to be a macroinvertebrate.
So I guess that kind of leads me to be a little bit curious. So what species do you typically find eat macroinvertebrates?
So fish will eat macroinvertebrates. Like I mentioned, they eat each other. They kind of have their own thing. Birds, really anything that would prey on any other like insect or in the water will eat them.
Let's see. Is there something that is bad for macroinvertebrates? So like, for instance, we talked about algal blooms a little bit in the last presentation. Is there, besides obviously something like that, is there something that is bad for macroinvertebrates that maybe people can do at home to help keep their water cleaner that would help them?
Yeah, so just like all aquatic life, I mean, they're going to be affected by pollution. They're going to be affected by contaminants in the water. And not just like pollution of chemicals and things like that. I actually had a plastic bag in the pond and I pulled it up just thinking, oh, I'm going to throw it away. And I saw that there was a ton of eggs laid on it. So, you know, any debris, the macroinvertebrates are going to just lay their eggs on it. But the problem is that's not natural and it's not going to provide the food for them that a leaf would or other decaying matter. So really just like keeping the waterways clean and keeping things that don't belong in there out will definitely help not only them, but really all aquatic life.
Sam, do you have a favorite kind of macroinvertebrate that you tend to find during your programs? What is it and why? Why is it your favorite?
Yeah, that's a good question because I started this a couple years ago knowing very little to nothing about macroinvertebrates and just really got into it because every time I went to the pond, I found something new and I would get my book out and be like, oh my goodness, what is this? And I just think that it's a really cool world down there. So one that I found all the time and just kind of whatever was the water boatman. And it never stood out to me until I read about it to figure out how exactly it breathes. And ever since then, I've just thought it was so cool because if we want to go, you know, scuba diving, we have to get a tank of oxygen, or fish have gills. This insect has a really unique way of breathing because it can literally come up to the surface and it like breaks the surface to form an air bubble. And then it carries that air bubble under its belly. And so it like carries around its own air and breathes from that, which I just thought was super cool. I'm going to grab my friend here.
Hi, Natalie. Welcome. So, Samantha, just to let you know, I don't know if you noticed, so Natalie's class was able to join us. So we actually switched to answering some questions from their students.
Yeah.
Okay, Evan, what question do you have?
How do the animal, the water insects
So I heard,
sorry.
I heard how do the water insects, but I didn't catch after that.
How do the water insects lay eggs?
How do they lay eggs? Okay, so that is a good question. They do it in a variety of ways. So some of them will just lay the eggs on leaves, like I showed in the video, and say, okay, guys, bye, fend for yourselves. So they just lay large numbers of eggs in leaves and offer camouflage there and hope that they survive. Other macroinvertebrates take a more hands-on role. So giant water bugs, for instance, the female will actually lay all of her eggs on the back of the male. And so he swims around and has all these eggs on his back. So that kind of offers them protection because they're swimming around, you know, the dad's swimming around and all the eggs are stuck to him. And then, I'm sorry, guys, you are just logging on, but my babysitter's in quarantine, so I have a friend with me. And then the leech is another one. They'll lay eggs on their belly and kind of stay curled up and keep the eggs with them, and they're protected that way. So I've noticed that when I find a leech that has eggs, it's not as stretched out. It tends to remain in ball form whenever possible. And I think that that's just kind of to protect the eggs a little.
Hey, Micah.
Do other bugs want to try to eat other bugs' eggs?
Yeah, so other macroinvertebrates will definitely try to eat some eggs and other things as well. So like fish and birds and things are going to try to eat the leaves and young macroinvertebrates too.
Hi, Jayla.
How long does it take for the
That really depends. So eggs will usually hatch probably in a season, but sometimes eggs or larvae can overwinter. So the parents will lay the eggs or the larvae in winter, like in the fall, and then they'll stay in the bottom of the pond all winter, and then they don't hatch and come out until the weather is nicer in spring.
Other questions? Evan again?
Do the water insects, could they possibly kill a fish?
Oh, now that is a fun question, because not a lot of people think about that, but there are a few really big ones that have been known to prey on small fish or tadpoles. So for instance, like there's something called a water scorpion, which kind of lives up to its name and is a pretty large macroinvertebrate, and it can prey on small fish and tadpoles as well.
Other questions? Okay, nice and loud. Camille, way in the back.
What's the lifespan of the insect?
She asked what the lifespan of the insects is.
The macroinvertebrates, it all depends, but like I was saying a little bit earlier, sorry, I'm moving around a lot. Hopefully I'm good now. They will spend more time in their larva stage, or like aquatic, like when they're kind of babies, that's a larva. They'll spend more time there than they do as adults. So they will spend sometimes 2 years in the water and then spend one summer up. So like a dragonfly larva might live underwater for a couple of seasons and then only have one summer with wings above the water.
Okay, Jayla?
Why do what do those things smell like? They suck the blood.
Leeches?
Yeah, why do leeches suck blood?
So you kind of stumped me there. I never thought about why, other than the fact that that's their specific, so that is their food source. They don't eat other things. They get nutrition from blood. I'm not sure what caused them to evolve that way or anything of that sort, but they have to suck blood because that's where they get their nutrients.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think in a similar fashion, why do mosquitoes suck blood? Not that we necessarily know, but it's just an adaptation that sometimes in nature, things like that happen, and it happens across the board, whether they're flying insects or leeches that you find in water. And so sometimes adaptations like that just happen in nature, and we don't know why.
Oh, we have Camber over here.
How do the insects form into different species?
I'm sorry, how do insects?
How do the insects form into different species is what she asked. Are you asking about their life cycle, maybe? Okay.
Okay, so different life cycles. Yeah, so they go through, some of them go through complete metamorphosis, some go through incomplete, and that just depends on the species. But so it actually goes from an egg to a larva stage, which sometimes looks very different than the adult stage, and sometimes is just a smaller version of the adult. So the example I keep going back to, I'm so sorry, guys, the timing of this is, I'm sorry, but so it's, the dragonfly, for example, is a really good one for this too, because it starts as an egg, and then in its larva form, it doesn't have wings. It looks very, very different, and it eats different. It's kind of like you wouldn't recognize it as a dragonfly even, and then when it goes through its final stage in metamorphosis, similar to like how a butterfly goes caterpillar to butterfly, this will actually molt, shed its exoskeleton, and get wings. and then it's able to fly, which it wasn't before.
Okay, Riley.
How come some bugs can live underwater and on land?
Okay, she said, how come some bugs can live underwater and on land both, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that all comes down to their individual adaptations. And a lot of the times it has to do with breathing, because that's the main thing that's really different, right? So like you and I can only spend so much time underwater, and we'll have to come up for oxygen. So it'd be hard to live under there. Where some insects have developed different ways of breathing. They actually have gills and can take in dissolved oxygen, or like the water boatman that I mentioned that can kind of break the surface and carry an air bubble with it to breathe. Mayflies wiggle their tails and kind of take in dissolved oxygen through their tails. So if they're able to do that, then they can breathe underwater and on land, which I think is a key to them being able to survive in both places.
We got Camille in the back.
Are some water insects nocturnal?
You said, are some water insects nocturnal?
Ooh, you guys have good ones. I'm not sure. They are, I know that some of them are once they're in their adult form. When they're underwater as macroinvertebrates in their aquatic form, I couldn't say for sure whether they prefer day or night.
Okay, Jayla, you had your hand up.
Yeah, you know that water beetle you saw? I think that's what it was. So about that water beetle thing, I don't remember what it's called, but the boat, why doesn't it move through its bottom? Yeah.
Why does it what?
Breathe out of its bottom.
They're talking about the macroinvertebrate that had the air bubble on its bottom.
Yeah. So there's a couple that do that. And it's like I said, they all have, that's why the macroinvertebrate world is really unique, because there's some really different adaptations that we don't see other places. So rather than evolving gills or a way to take in dissolved oxygen, it just breaks the surface of the water and carries the air bubble with it. So that way it never has to worry about using dissolved oxygen. It just goes and gets more from the surface.
Okay, Evan?
How can the insects see? Like, how many eyesights can they see?
Yeah. So I know that some of them definitely can see, because it talks about how they visualize their prey, and there's certain colors and things that that help them blend in. But I'm not sure that their eyesight would be like ours, like at all. It's, if you've ever seen like looking through a glass with many, many things to see like a fly, that's a common one where you can see a lot of something, but it's distorted. So not to say that they all have vision like a fly, but it's going to be very different than our vision. It's going to be more about colors and just stimuli rather than making out individual things.
Well, we probably have enough time for maybe one or two more questions. So,
Okay, Jayla?
Is there a special way they can hear? Like, hear something?
oh,
Is there a special way they can hear?
I don't know for sure that they hear. I'm trying to think of any specific examples I've read about that would say that they can hear.
I'd imagine it's something more they're sensitive to vibrations.
Yeah, they definitely are able to sense that you're there without seeing you, because I've had it where if I like wiggle the water, inadvertently, or even just walking by, I can see them startle, but I'm not sure that that's so much hearing. I think, Brittany, you might be right. It's more about like they can sense the vibration.
Okay, Evan?
leave off germs like, in the water.
Do they what germs?
Do they leave off germs in the water?
So I'm not sure, like, I guess I might take that a couple ways. Like if you're asking if they're affected by germs or if like handling them causes germs, I'm not sure, but they're going to be susceptible to diseases and parasites and things. I'm not sure like germs specifically, like it'd be very different, the germs that affect them and us sort of thing.
Okay, Micah.
How do they shoot that stuff, like that poison to like kill all the bugs' insides? And then like eat the insides of the bug? Like how does that work?
Okay, I think he's talking about the beetle when it punctures and injects and then it's like a milkshake, you said in the video.
Yeah, so that's definitely a popular one. A surprising amount of macroinvertebrates are piercer predators, and so they have a specialized mouth part. It's kind of like a sharp beak with a straw built in, and that's what allows them to stab their prey. And then they create a chemical that they can inject to liquefy their prey. And then again, their specialized mouth part allows them to kind of suck it up like a little bug milkshake.
All right, so it is 12 o'clock. Why don't we thank Miss Samantha. I'm admitting the next presenter. So Natalie, I don't know if you're staying or not, but if you guys want to thank Miss Samantha.
Thank you, Miss Samantha.
Thank you.
I am actually switching to another class, so thank you.